Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today we're going to talk about the Millennium Project and several international activities that are underway that are of interest to people in every corner of the world. My guest today is an expert on this topic. Jerry Glenn is a futurist who serves as the executive director of the Millennium Project. He authors an annual publication titled State of the Future. He was the executive director of the American Council for the United Nations University and the deputy director of Partnership for Productivity International. He was also a Peace Corps volunteer from 1968 to 1970. Jerry Glenn, welcome to today's Global Connections Television.
Nice to be here.
Great, glad to have you back again. We got a lot to cover here in a very short time frame. Let me just ask you very briefly, what is the Millennium Project? When was it formed? What does it do?
Yeah,
And that type of thing.
yeah, it's a think tank. It's a little unusual think tank in the sense that we're not all in one place. We have what we call nodes. These are groups of individuals and institutions in 70 places around the world. And so it's a collaborative, interactive think tank that produces futures research methodology series, a state of the future reports, and other special studies on the future. And we try to do those things that require global perspectives that are not being addressed well in the conversation. So we try not to repeat what other people have already done.
Very good. It's a very interesting publication. It's very readable. That's the best part about it. You don't get
Thank you.
overwhelmed with,
Thank
you
you.
get some facts, figures, statistics, that type of thing, but it's very, very good. And you can go to Jerry's website at www.millennium-project.org to get more information on it.
Yep. And we
So,
spell it the English way rather than the Spanish or Latin way with two L's
okay.
and two N's. Millennium. Anyway.
Exactly, right. Exactly. Okay. Well, let's jump into this State of the Future 20.0. What is State of the Future 20.0?
It is, until somebody corrects me, the largest, most detailed document or book or report on the future that has been written so far. Extraordinary statement. There are great books on environment, great books and reports on technology and so forth.
Mhm.
We do is we're trying to look at the whole thing across the board. Like, for example, we have an executive summary, maybe like 5 or 7 pages, which we think is also the best overview you can get. Because most overviews are written from a country's point of view, or an issue's point of view, or an ideology point of view. We're trying to say, with all these people around the world, how do you pull it together as an executive summary? That's one point. Secondly, then we have a section on 15 global challenges. This is what we believe is a way to wrap your mind around global change. How do you understand the whole game? In the same way that we have in the body, uh, respiratory system, skeletal system, and so forth. And we understand that's the way the body works. We think the 15 global challenges are a system of understanding global change. So we update the content, we update the actions, and we update the regional considerations on all of these things. Then we have a State of the Future Index. How are we doing in 10 years? When we have a bunch of indicators that we pull together into where are we winning and where we're losing and how are we doing. Then we also have some specialty studies in there. The main one was on artificial general intelligence. That accounted for about 200 pages of the 500 pages of the report. We believe that artificial general intelligence, the transition to it and the governance of it, is the most serious issue we face today, bar none, including climate change. And I wrote about climate change in 1973, so I'm there. But climate change doesn't wipe us out until maybe 2021, some 25 or so. But loss of control of AGI into superintelligence beyond our control could happen within 5 to 10 years. I mean, this is a near-term thing. So the international coordination and regulations on this has got to move faster than UN has ever moved before. Then we have a section on the future of the UN as well. What are the different elements of the future of UN from a think tank with Secretary General, the Future Lab. They've already had the summit on the future. There's some 4 or 5 other elements. We sort of assess those elements. Then we've got like if AGI turns out okay, what does it look like? Then we also have one on the future of robotics and then conclusion. So it covers a lot of territory, but it gets into ethics and democratization and a lot of other non-technological issues as well. It was quite a thing. And people can like jump through the report. The best way to get is a PDF. This way you can sort of keyword search and jump into different reports. It's not as extensive as an encyclopedia, but it's getting close to it.
Exactly. Now, something like this is AGI would have to have some type of international coordination, cooperation, because you have rogue states or individual countries that want to do their own thing. Who knows what could actually happen? What is the UN doing to bring these countries together to focus on this problem and to work up the guidelines, so to speak, or the rules of the game, shall we say?
The UN has done a lot of work on what we call narrow intelligence. That's the stuff we have today.
Mhm.
And the near-term future, still quasi-narrow AI that people are seeing around the world. There's two UN resolutions on this. There's the Secretary General's report on this. There's been a lot of activities around it. There's laws in China on this. There's laws in Europe on this. But what's not being addressed is the next step, which is the artificial general intelligence. This is the stuff that can start to be a little more autonomous, a little bit more rewriting its code if it's given a problem and it doesn't know how to handle it. It researches to find out what would it have to do to be able to do that. So then it rewrites its code to do that. So the narrow intelligence that the UN has addressed so far does not do that. Coming up in the future, this is the stuff that we're looking at. And one of the primary activities on this is the UN Council of Presidents of the General Assembly. This is a small group of former presidents of the General Assembly, plus the current president. And they're an organization that sort of is to help the president of the General Assembly. And they have taken on the idea of bringing AGI to the world. So this is in process right now. I'm not sure when this will air, but we put together a panel of some of the leading minds on this, Yashua Bengio, Stuart Russell, and other top people, to put together what ought to be the General Assembly's role on this, because the General Assembly is the best place to have countries around the world share their views on things. And we've got to have the world get educated fast on the future possibilities, good and bad, of AGI. And the General Assembly's place to do it, and this UN Council of Presidents is the mechanism at the moment to do that, to get that to happen.
Mhm. Yes, that's the logical place for it because you've got basically all the countries of the world in the UN General Assembly, 193 member states that are there, and they're all going to be affected by it, whether they think so or not at this point.
Right.
So
That's
they
right.
really need to be on their toes on this one. But we're going to come back and talk about that in just a minute. Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved in a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you have a podcast, or you just have a computer, you like our show and you would like to share it, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today, we're taking a look at some of the major international problems affecting people, all 8.2 billion people on the planet, and talking about what we can do in conjunction with the United Nations and other groups. My guest today is Jerry Glenn, who is a futurist who serves as the executive director of the Millennium Project. Jerry, we're talking about this AGI. You're going to have some recommendations coming out. You already have some in the hopper, but as you see the long-term effects of this and the players who are involved, what do you think they should recommend to be able to consistently deal with this particular issue and not get behind on it or not lose interest in it, which does happen from time to time, but to stay on top of it and to really coalesce the world, much like they did with tried to do with the Sustainable Development Goals until we got hit with COVID and things sort of flew apart at that juncture, but that's another story. But what should they do to really keep the spotlight on it, come right down to it?
Well, first, which has been recommended by almost every AI leader in the world, familiarize yourself with it. Do some Google searches. Read a little bit about this so that you understand what's coming up. This will hopefully, the first major step should be a General Assembly special session specifically on AGI. The reason I say specifically, because when they say we're going to do something on AI, they just deal with the present tense stuff. They don't deal with the next stuff. So that's one. Two, I would hope that a General Assembly might then call for some UN convention on artificial general intelligence. What should be the rules of the game? And put that together. And that would maybe authorize the creation of some AGI agency. So we'd need a feasibility study to put that together. But just like we have an International Atomic Energy Agency managing the relations of both the good and the bad of atomic energy, we need to do the same thing with AGI. However, this is different than anything we've ever faced in history because AGI, as I said, can recursively relearn and get smarter at every moment and interact with many other AGIs worldwide beyond our understanding. Now, I know that the Secretary General has used the analogy of the International Atomic Energy Agency, but it should be pointed out that uranium does not rewrite its atomic code. Uranium doesn't get smarter every time you interact with it. So the management of this thing is something we've never faced before. So we need the collective best intelligence the planet can get together, and that again through the General Assembly, which has to deal with both nation-state rules as well as the international coordination. And that coordination between nation-state rules being put together and the international level has got to be done in coherence faster than we've ever done any international activity in the history of civilization. This is a completely different game.
It certainly is, and it's a much more dangerous game in some respects. Do you see that the private sector wants to get involved in this? Are they contributing and participating in it?
Yes. It will surprise your listeners to know that one of the primary champions of international regulations and control of AGI is none other than Elon Musk. For over 10 years, people will say, well, like, you're not in favor of regulations on space travel. And he goes, yeah, but this is different. I mean, he's got it. He understands that this is something we've never faced before. You've had Bill Gates, you've had the heads of OpenAI and Anthropic, all of the leaders say, we've got to do some international collaboration on this. But it hasn't gelled yet. However, I am not privy to the boardroom conversation of all these companies, but I am sure on that boardroom agenda every time is how do we put together the rules that we would like? Like, for example, there is a movement afoot of some company creating a set of chips that would control the use of AGI. So if it does something that's outlawed or wrong, the chip would stop the functioning. So because how do you control something so fancy and complex around the world? Well, by the thing that runs the system, the chips, the computer chips. So these things are in process. I am optimistic that this is possible, but it would mean the cooperation of humans in China, United States, and other countries that has never happened before so fast.
That's a very important point. What has been the cooperation of China, Russia, and the United States? Because there's a bit of a strain here, to put it mildly, amongst those three countries. But are they cooperating on this particular initiative or not?
Yeah. Well, I've had meetings with officials in China, and they're saying, sure, let's do it. But they don't believe the U.S. will cooperate. I mean, that's I don't know if that's the official position, but that's the official position I've been given. We'll cooperate. We don't think the Americans will. I suspect that now Russia has said that they don't want any international or what they call supranational body controlling the future of AI because their position is that the United States and the West would control it, and they don't want that. So that's why we're really pushing to get a U.S. China or China U.S. leadership in this. However, it turns out with both U.S. and China, for it to work, it's got to be there. So if anybody's got the ability to push the United States in this direction, it'd be good. We're hoping that Elon Musk will come to the fore because he's the one that knows the most on this in the U.S. side and is engaged. And he's on the record of doing this. He's even testified in U.S. Congress on this.
Right. You mentioned Elon Musk, which takes me into another area automatically. What kind of feedback are you getting from the folks you run into at the United Nations? Now, I know at the UN, everybody wants, generally speaking, they want to be cooperative, collaborative, work together, that type of thing. They don't speak disparagingly of one another in most instances, but sometimes they do. But what feedback do you get when you see that the United States is pushing this manifest destiny philosophy of incorporating Canada or Greenland or the old gunboat diplomacy that we had, that we were hated for in Latin America and the Caribbean for decades, of trying to take the Panama Canal back, or even renaming the Gulf of Mexico? What do you get any feedback from folks on that?
Oh, sure. They say they'll push back. I mean, you've heard Greenland talk. You've heard Mexico and Canada talk. You know, they're pretty clear. They're saying we're happy to trade, we're happy to have good relations, but no, we don't want you to take us over. And
Exactly.
Greenland has got an advanced base. You know, the United States already there. So a lot of these places have, you know, long-standing relations. They're just happy to collaborate, but not to be taken over.
Mhm. And this go it alone, support Russia and Ukraine attitude on part of the government has really caused the Europeans to coalesce and to develop really a camaraderie, that they realize they cannot rely on the United States anymore. And they actually need to pool their resources and to get behind Ukraine, because Ukraine is really keeping us out of World War III to a large degree. According to the foreign policy experts, they are really slowing Russia down, because Russia took over Ukraine, next country Poland, then Lithuania, then on across the board. But it's really we've really mobilized large parts of the world against us, have we not?
Yes.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And we'll be writing books on this, volumes on it, that's for sure. Yes. Well, great. Well, what else, getting back to the suggestions on how to deal with AI and that type of AGI, what what other recommendations would you make, or what should we be on the lookout for? And how can we learn? Well, we can go to your website, we know that, but how can we learn more about this? This is an issue that I'd say, quote, the insiders, unquote, know a lot about, but really most people, I don't get the feeling they're on top of it. I know I'm not. So maybe I'm just making a broad speculation there.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to come back in a second to the idea of a new paradigm, new model for international affairs dealing with synergy. But before I do, I think one of the easiest way for your listeners to get this is the analogy of a human being. Um, think of the narrow intelligence we have right now as being a little child. You tell it what to wear, you tell them when to go to sleep, you're in charge. They may kick and scream, but you're in charge, right? A teenager is a little bit like the artificial general intelligence. That's the stuff we're talking about here. And the teenager, you've got a little less control. You think you got, but not complete control. And they got some purple hair and they're trying on roles and doing different things. And they're learning very rapidly of different stuff around the world and so forth. And then the super intelligence is like the adult. They're beyond your control. They're adult, they're autonomous, they're their own person. Now, every parent knows, regardless of the culture, that if you want your child to grow into a nice, good, healthy adult with good values and so forth, it's between a child and teenager. That's the area where you can actually develop good moral character, ethics, and so forth. And we're saying the same thing about the AI. The transition from the narrow stuff to the general stuff, this is what we're in right now. This is the time when we can get all the right values in there, get the international agreements together. And this is the time we have to act, because if we decide to throw in rules after AGI is already accelerating, that's like telling the teenager when they're turning into an adult, okay, now we got to have some rules for you. Too late.
Mhm. Exactly, exactly. And this is very important to keep this going. And of course, as I mentioned, our viewers can go to your website. They can also go to www.un.org and see that vast array of United Nations programs. It's not just AGI, is far beyond that, with peacekeeping, with humanitarian activities, with combating diseases, and diseases are now really starting to rear their ugly head and making a comeback. They're going to be, well, they are making a comeback in the United States and in many other areas of the world. So this is absolutely critical. Well, Jerry, you've been involved with these folks for decades now, and you are a leader in this area. In the last 2 minutes we have, what would you recommend that we think about or that we do, and to try to learn more about it and to actually be involved as best we can? Now, I know many of us can't be hands-on involved, but there are other ways to be involved, maybe with organizations or with activities or attending sessions or Zoom sessions or whatever. But what would you recommend for us to do?
I'd recommend applying synergy. Um, right now, the world game is a zero-sum power geopolitical game. And when they have a US report on the future or a Chinese report on the future or UK, it tends to be what will increase or decrease our power. Well, if that is the model, that's unending conflict in one form or another forever. And with the weapons coming up, we're in trouble. So therefore, we've got to come up with a different way of dealing with international affairs. And I would suggest that our schools of diplomacy and our business schools, when they teach competitive intelligence, competitive analysis, competitive advantage, competitive strategy, I would like them in parallel to teach synergetic intelligence, synergetic advantage, synergetic strategy. Now, what do I mean by this? Buckminster Fuller, famous American futurist, popularized, it came out of physics, synergy, that he put it into the social context, is that you take a wheel and a box, you put the wheel in the box, you don't get much. Take the wheel out of the box, put it underneath it, you get a wheelbarrow. You can do a lot of work. So it's not that the box cooperates with the wheel, it's that they make a new thing.
Mhm.
So, for example, take what we were talking about. If the United States and China could create some new mechanism for global collaboration on AGI, that's a new thing. They've created something that was not there before. And it's not that the United States and China are just cooperating for being nice, it's because they're interdependent. Just like the wheel and the box is an interdependent new thing. We've got to teach this way of thinking, I think, in schools of business and schools of diplomacy around the world, to seek what are the synergetic possibilities, whatever it happens to be, between your local communities, international affairs, even at look at businesses. If they create synergetic relationships, they should do better.
Exactly. And we are in an interdependent world. This go it alone, Fortress America, not going to work, probably would never work, but certainly will not work in this environment that we're in. And we have to cooperate and coordinate with groups. And one of the best ways to do it is under the roof of the United Nations. There are other ways too, but that's one way we have to. It's in our best interest and the best interest of the world at large. But Jerry Glenn, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you, Bill.
My pleasure. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.